Welcome to lecture number 6 of COM 146, American TV and Cultural Diversity. As we've said before, it all starts with children. As children watch more and more television, we're seeing more and more of its effects on the development of their worldview and ideas about life. There are many of these effects, but the two biggest concerns to most people are about the effects of TV violence and sex on children. We begin with violence. The big question, of course, is does TV violence make for violent kids? As I said in the last lecture, there have been studies which suggest that watching violence on TV may cause aggressive behavior in some children. But a number of social scientists doubt the validity of those studies. I also told you that while many video games contain a lot of violence, there is no hard evidence that it causes aggressive behavior in kids. If you remember, I described how the military apparently believes that it does, because they have spent 30 years and billions of dollars developing video combat simulators to train soldiers how to kill. But even that is anecdotal and not scientific evidence. Well, in spite of all this, many people still believe that there has been a definite proven connection between TV violence and kids' aggressive behavior. It's somewhat understandable considering that current television contains a massive amount of violence. For instance, the average American child sees about 8,000 murders on TV by the end of elementary school and 200,000 violent acts by the age of 18. From movies to television shows to video games to children's programs to 24-hour news channels, aggression and violence have become normal and routine. But the whole issue begs one big question. Why do the vast majority of us watch TV and never commit a violent act? Well, surprisingly enough, it was the world's leading authority on TV violence who broke with tradition and said it's because television really doesn't cause violent behavior.
Typical notion of effects on television, and indeed most of the media questions and discussion about the effects of television can be exemplified by the notion that when people ask about violence, they say, does it create more violence?
There's something else that the experts we talk to say about this increase in teen violence and crime. They say it may be caused by the messages that are being sent to the teens.
The effect is supposed to be an imitation and kind of a monkey-see, monkey-do effect.
In Indianapolis Monday, a 4-year-old told police he shot his sister in the head because he saw someone do it on the TV.
When you see violence, you're going to conduct violence, and you're going to commit violence.
Does anyone disagree with that conclusion, that your violence in films propagates violent conduct on behalf of the children?
Well, this is really trivial. The contribution of television violence into the actual committing of violence is practically negligible. And nobody has been able to demonstrate that it is a significant contributor compared to poverty, compared to subcultures in which violence is very frequent, compared to many other factors that really are the root cause.
But that doesn't mean that children are not affected at all by TV violence. In fact, while Gerbner isn't convinced that it promotes violent behavior, he does believe that it causes many children to view the world as mean and scary. He calls it the mean world syndrome and says that it is this constant barrage of TV violence that has a cumulative effect on kids, and according to his famous cultivation theory, it can cultivate this mean world idea in children's minds. Now to sex. Children today are bombarded with adult sexual images. Even some cartoons show female characters with exaggerated body parts who exhibit at least a tinge of sexuality. I know I gave you this information before concerning TV sex, but I think that it bears repeating, because sex seems to be everywhere you look on TV. And some social scientists believe that it is getting to kids before they're ready for it. What's the fear? Well, the fear, of course, is that too early exposure will distort their sense of healthy sexuality. So here are the facts. The number of sex scenes on TV has nearly doubled since 1998, with 70% of the top 20 most watched shows by teens including sexual content. Of the shows with sexual content, an average of 5 scenes per hour involve sex. 15% of scenes with sexual intercourse depict characters that have just met having sex. Several studies show that teens who watch lots of sexual content on TV are more likely to engage in sexual activities earlier than peers who don't watch sexually explicit shows. Kids get much of their information about sex from TV, and sex seems to be everywhere you look on television. And just like it seems to do for many things, television stereotypes sexuality for both men and women. Girls are sweet and pretty. Women are soft and nurturing. Boys are rough and tumble, and they love sports, while men are tough, and they take care of the family. On their surface, these stereotypes don't appear hurtful or unkind, but they reflect gender bias that can reinforce a harmful subtext. They tell women that they must please others before they can please themselves, that the closer they are to an idealized image of beauty, the happier they'll be, that they are primarily an object of desire and sexual pleasure for men. Well, intellectually, we all know that boys, men, girls, and women are much more than that. But children grow up with these stereotypes, and social scientists tell us that emotionally, many of them come to believe that that's really how things are, and that that's the way they should be. In other words, it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. But with all this, I am making some generalizations here that some of you may disagree with. Fortunately, I have a portion of a documentary for you to watch that argues that agreement or disagreement doesn't really matter because stereotyping is a social fact with a long history. It's called Sexual Stereotypes in the Media, and it has a more scientific, social, and even psychological explanation of all these stereotypes of more than just men and women.
Whether we agree or disagree with these generalizations is really beside the point. Each idea has deep and primitive origins, and each idea or archetype carries complex emotional and cultural meaning. Analytical psychologist Carl Jung defined an archetype as a collectively inherited unconscious idea, pattern of thought, or image, universally present in individual psyches. According to Jung, male and female archetypes are representations of the animus and anima, a human duality similar to the Chinese concept of yin and yang. Ample evidence exists across cultures of male and female archetypes. A potent example is the woman who must suffer and be redeemed. Eve, cast out with Adam from the Garden of Eden due to her transgression. Isis, wandering the earth to reclaim her male counterpart. Persephone, torn between her mother and the god of the underworld. Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty, all fairy tale heroines who must be rescued from their dark dreams. Jung identified many such archetypes: the hero, the maiden, the wise old man, the magician, the earth mother, the witch, the trickster. According to Jung, children spend much of their time trying to make sense of the opposite gender through the archetypes they encounter in myths and stories.
In one sense, you can say it's human nature to think of the world in terms of recognizable characters or recognizable plots, and yet a lot gets left out. They also tend to make us think that what we see repeated in media, images or certain kinds of stories, is the only possibility for a way to be, for a way to live, for a way to have an identity and present that identity to the world. And the irony is, the more that certain very understandably appealing and recognizable kinds of characters appear in media, the more we think that that is reality. And in fact, it's an ideal representation, and reality is much more diverse.
The history of Western civilization has been told mostly through the accounts of privileged men. Our storytellers had everything to gain by keeping the status quo, and they still do. Cultural archetypes are potent forces in the construction of consensus reality and authority. Hegemony is the process by which those in power secure the consent or social submission of those not in power. Typically, this is accomplished not by means of force, but rather through the transmission of values of religion, education, and the media, a process known collectively as socialization. In the 1970s, white men were most often shown as professional businessmen and upholders of justice. Classic examples include James Bond and Steve McGarrett, cool characters who were strong, incorruptible, and unapproachable. African American males, on the other hand, were often portrayed as underemployed, unprofessional, and as criminals. Women of color were usually depicted as objects of sex and violence, or as domestics. Gay men were stereotyped as interior decorators or hairdressers. The word lesbian was not even in the public vernacular, much less depicted in the media.
If there were gay characters in plotted sitcoms or dramas, they symbolized either comedy or trouble. And so we haven't seen television shows depicting gay people living normal lives, possibly ever. Representations of gay men are stereotyped as being obsessed with decorating, being vain, being worried about aging, being extremely dramatic, being tearful and weak while also a diva. All of these stereotypes that have been applied to women for years.
So these are the stereotypes children grow up with. Probably the stereotypes you grew up with, and hopefully this information will make you take a second look at them and maybe allow you to make up your own adult mind. In the meantime, we will now take a look at the TV programming aimed at very young children, because that's when kids are first introduced to many of these stereotypes. The largest purveyors of children's programming are the Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and of course the Disney Channel. Disney in particular has a huge influence on kids, and we will analyze this American icon and its sexual and gender role stereotyping in particular. Animated cartoons are central to Disney's business and cultural influence as well, but they're not its only source of revenue. In the last decade, Disney sold over $3 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars worth of toys based on characters from its animated features. Disney theme parks now have more visitors each year than all of the 54 national parks in the United States. Your textbook has an article about Disney in chapter 42 on page 383. I'll warn you now that this reading is rather hard to read and has a radical view of Disney. Namely, that its main goal is to perpetuate the status quo of a patriarchal, capitalistic, and conservative status quo. But for the purposes of this lecture segment on stereotyping of sex and gender roles, we are now going to take a look at a documentary about Disney called The Mickey Mouse Monopoly.
Ta-da! And of course you know that we're so beautiful. But I'm the prettiest one, huh? Silly. Sharp. Tender.
What's the amazing when you look at Disney and Disney movies over the years is how little the image of females has really changed. You still have the same highly sexualized female body with the big breasts, the tiny waists, the fluttering eyelashes, the coy expressions, the seductress. These images seem very similar over the years, and even when they're in animal form, you know, you've got this very seductive little female animal.
Hello.
What we find is that this presents people with a kind of notion of what femininity is about. This is not a mirror on society. This is not reflecting who women really are or what females really are. It is basically constructing notions of what femininity is. And these are not notions that necessarily Disney invented, but what they do with these notions is they caricature them. They wrap them up in this Magic Kingdom wrapper and they sell them to children. And that's really the power of Disney.
When they're young, they're trying to figure out, what does it mean to be a woman? What do I look like if I'm a girl? What should I look like? And they'll focus on the most salient, dramatic images they can see. They don't necessarily think about, well, that doesn't look like the women I know in real life. They don't make those kinds of comparisons, because that's kind of like making a movie, putting a whole story together, doing logical comparisons. They think about one slide at a time. This is how it looks here. Gee, that's interesting. Maybe I want to look like that. So it shapes kids' images about how they're going to look.
There's no one as burly and brawny.
As you see, I've got biceps to spare.
Not a bit of him scraggly or scrawny.
That's right. And every last inch of me's covered with hair.
In Beauty and the Beast, you have Lumiere, the candlestick, and the broom, the feminine broom, acting out these male-female themes where he's the aggressor and she's saying, oh, no, no, no. And then, by golly, he sweeps her off her feet after she said, no, 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 no.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
I've been burnt by you before.
So it's a replication of the woman as holding back, woman as being coquettish, or even woman as saying, no, I don't want this, but what she really means is, yes, I do.
Jasmine in the Aladdin film, in which there's a scene where she becomes a seductress to distract the person who's after Aladdin.
I never realized how incredibly handsome you are.
That's better. Now, Pussycat, tell me more about myself.
Your beard is so twisted.
This I find very dangerous because you have, again, it gives young girls the idea that that is the way that you get what you want. You use your body to manipulate people into, and specifically men, into to get what it is that you want.
One of the themes seen repeatedly in Disney's movies is that however strong or powerful a female character may be, she still needs to be rescued by a male. In the world of Disney, females not only get into trouble easily, they also lack the ability to save their own lives. This is true even of Disney's films of the 80s and 90s.
Princess Mermaid one is a really big theme with girls. When I just walked into the room, two of the girls were playing. One girl was laying, dying, and the other one was crying. And one of the girls was playing at the playground, and she was up against a fence like this, and the boys were coming to her rescue. And how it had happened so early, it amazes me that they grab onto that.
When you look at the image of Snow White today, you know, with a sort of feminist sensibility, you realise how ridiculous the image is. Here you've got this young female, completely isolated, at home, enjoying cooking and cleaning, and her friends are the animals, and she's happy. I mean, it just makes no sense today, given that feminism and feminist discourse has seeped down into everyday life.
Now you wash the dishes, you tidy up the room, you clean the fireplace, and I'll use the broom.
So what Disney has to do in order to keep up with the themes of a society is they have to keep changing. In Little Mermaid, you know, she does defy her father. There is a sense of a more powerful female here.
I set certain rules, and I expect those rules to be obeyed.
You don't even know him.
Know him? I don't have to know him. They're all the same, incapable of any feeling.
Daddy, I love him!
But of course, ultimately, she's willing to give up her voice to get the mail. And once she's given up the voice, the only thing she has left to get him is the body. Now, a more interesting, complex reality is Mulan, where this is a very powerful, strong character who almost single-handedly wins the war. And so we do have a real independent female. However, after the war, and she goes home, then the expectations of femininity are exactly the same. It's as if it never happened.
Great. She brings home a sword. If you ask me, she should have brought home a man.
Excuse me. Does Fa Mulan live here?
We have examples like Beauty and the Beast, where their argument was this is a strong, powerful woman. And why is she strong and powerful? Because she's reading a book.
Ah, Belle.
Good morning. I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Well, in reality, it's just a pseudo-feminism. Because ultimately, in Beauty and the Beast, is that she marries a batterer.
A great deal of my work in my professional life has to do with family violence. And when you look at that movie with that eye, the abuse is horrific.
No, Belle, listen to me. I'm old. I've lived my life.
Wait.
Belle!
Wait!
He screams at her. He imprisons her. He throws her father out the door and rips her family away from her. His behavior is, without question, frankly and horrifically abusive.
Where is she?
She's not coming.
What?
Your Grace! Your Eminence!
I thought I told you to come down to dinner.
I'm not hungry.
You'll come out or I'll break down the door.
Gently, gently.
Will you come down to dinner, please?
No, thank you.
You can't stay in there forever.
Yes, I can.
Fine. Then go ahead and starve! If she doesn't eat with me, then she doesn't eat at all.
And yet the whole thrust of the story is that she returns to him, that she socializes him, that she excuses him, that she reinterprets his rage and his abuse as temper, that she reinterprets his personality as tender and vulnerable, and then that she falls in love with him.
There's something sweet and almost kind, but he was mean and he was coarse and unrefined, and now he's dear and so unsure. I wonder why I didn't see it there before.
And this is a movie that is saying to our children, overlook the abuse, overlook the violence. There's a tender prince lurking within, and it's your job to kiss that prince and bring it out, or to kiss that beast and bring the prince out. That's a dangerous message.
If Belle was my friend and I saw what happened to her, like yelling and romantic, I'd be happy for her because she found someone who she liked, and I would be happy for her that she likes the beast and that she would stay with him, but I'd also feel bad for her because she gets yelled at a lot. If Belle was my friend and I'd seen her go through this whole thing, I'd probably just say, keep on being nice and sweet like you are, and that would probably change him. And in the movie, it does.
Indians! Ah, quite savage, you know.
I've worked in the media, and often I was surprised, sometimes very intelligent, mostly white writers, college graduates, held stereotypes about a lot of people and would write, when they wrote them into stories, would write it from a stereotypic point of view. It's like they didn't know any other way to write it because frequently they were not involved in a social, personal way with blacks or Latinos or Asian Americans. So they would, when they had to write something about them, they had to draw on what they knew, and frequently what they knew was what they picked up from the media, and frequently that was stereotypic.
When I start to decode images of Disney in class, one of the first things the students will say to me, well, is it intentional, this racism, this sexism? And of course the answer to that has to be, well, first of all, we do know that the vast majority of people in Hollywood who are in power and who have creative power and ownership power, basically the vast majority is white and male. We know that. But the real answer to that is it doesn't really matter if it's intentional or unintentional, because the effect is ultimately the same. And also, what's the most important thing is that, Mickey Mouse doesn't write these scripts. These scripts are written by real people who themselves have been socialized in this society. And they're going to internalize those norms and those values. And so when they produce work, it's bound to come out in some way. Unless, of course, they make a really conscious decision to operate within an alternative ideology.
But media stereotyping has become a lot more than just television. Kids are now growing up with the internet, and as National Public Radio's Bob Garfield says, that's a whole new ballgame.
The internet has changed everything. I mean, absolutely everything. People think, oh, it's a new medium, like first there was radio, and then there was television, and then there was... No. This is like fire. This is like antibiotics. This is like gunpowder. This is like movable type. This is changing the way human beings relate to each other on a grand...
The internet has opened up a whole new world of freedom for kids to express themselves on social networking sites. But the problem is that the expressions many kids have to offer have unknowingly been shaped by society's traditional stereotyping, and that can have a negative impact. In many ways, the internet simply perpetuates sexual and gender stereotypes and gives them sort of a new outlet. But one advantage of the online world is that everyone can see it. So if someone posts some sexist or misogynist messages, they will instantly get a lot of criticism or support, depending on who is doing the posting. Well, additionally, many teens and even tweens don't fully grasp the viral nature of the web and that anything they post can be seen worldwide. But as with any new media, there are casualties, and this new freedom of communication does not help immature teens who use the web to reinvent themselves, unaware of the traditional gender stereotypes they and others have unconsciously adopted.
Reserved.
Like once I was talking to my friend and he was like, send me a picture. I was like, I don't want to send my a naked picture of myself because I'm not comfortable with like my naked body. He's like, fine, send it with like minimal clothing on and I'll send you one of me. So we're like, okay. So I'm in my bathroom and I take the picture And then I uploaded my computer and I emailed it to him, and then I deleted it off my computer, and it just was like something to do. It was like, it didn't really mean anything. Like, it was just like a picture.
I used to have 4 pages of myself on MySpace, but I lowered it down to 1. Yeah. And like in the pictures, like you kind of want to look hot, but you don't want to look too hot so people think, ew, whore.
Scotch tape. Oh, look at that dimple. My pictures, I try to smile on the side because my dimple. That's me, Hood Princess.
I like moving around, posing, doing
Model
this,
shots.
doing that. Yeah, model shots.
In a way, the social networking sites are this digital representation of what we think of as adolescence. So what teens are doing is going around and trying on these different identities. I'm a goth, or I'm a punk rocker, I'm a surfer, or I'm this or that. And the internet's allowed them to display that identity in a very dramatic and very succinct way.
I didn't want to be known as Jess. That was the last thing that I ever wanted, because all it did was remind me of the girl who had no friends. And I wanted to be the total opposite.
For Jessica Hunter, growing up in Madison, New Jersey was a series of daily humiliations.
I never fit the mold. I would try and try and try, and it just wasn't me. I was constantly being made fun of. People would push me into my locker. They'd constantly be calling me a goth. I felt so insecure. I felt like an alien, you know, in this all-white bread town.
But online, Jessica was reborn as the goth model and artist Autumn Eddowes.
Email address, profile, everything. Everything was Autumn Eddowes.
Her parents didn't know.
I knew that I could not tell them because they wouldn't understand. You know, like I would lie my ass off just to keep my identity sacred.
She just withdrew. You never saw her. She wouldn't eat with us. She just disappeared into her room. I would open her door, you know, try to get in. What are you looking at? And, you know, the screen would change, and, you know, I was concerned. What's going on? Is she talking to bad people? What's going on here?
You know, I was only 14, but I looked like I was 18. You know, I'd be in, like, lingerie or something. And more people started noticing. Like, oh, you're so beautiful. Like, I love this picture of you. It, like, really got big. I was on the computer all day, replying. Like, I would hit the refresh button, and there would be, like, 10 more comments. It was crazy. It was so crazy, but I loved it. I've heard from actual friends of mine that live in, you know, South Jersey. They were like, somebody came up to me today and was talking about you. And they were asking me, so, like, have you ever heard of this model, Autumn Eddowes? And they're like, yeah, you mean Jess, right? And the person would be like, no, her name's Autumn. I didn't feel like myself, but I liked the fact that I didn't feel like myself. I felt like someone completely different. I felt like I was famous.
I get a phone call, and the principal says one of the parents had seen disturbing photographs and material. Mostly it was the photographs of Jessica, and they were considered to be pornographic as far as she was concerned. I had no idea what she was doing, no idea what was going on the internet. That was a big surprise.
The principal ended up going to my website, deemed it completely and utterly provocative, inappropriate. You know, it supposedly offended people. Everyone was calling me a whore. You know, when really the pictures were, in comparison to the things that I've seen on the internet, they really were not terrible. Compared to, you know, the girls that are just taking pictures of their butts, you know, just with like a thong. And that's what other girls would do, like all throughout my school.
Jessica's parents felt they had to intervene.
I remember my mother came up in my room, and my computer used to be right behind me, and she stood right behind me and watched me delete every single file.
It was a lesson she had to learn. And the lesson being, you don't know who you can trust, and you got to be very careful about where this information goes and how people perceive these photos or this information, how they can take it and change it, the context of it, and get you in trouble. And it was a tough lesson for her.
It was all gone as quickly as it had begun. The fame, the adulation, the hundreds of friends.
I was just completely erased from that whole world, that whole realm of the internet. You know, and it seems really stupid that, like, I'm getting upset over it, probably to a lot of, you know, people, but if you have something that's that meaningful to you, to have it taken away is like your worst nightmare.
As with all things, there are advantages and disadvantages to the newfound freedom of the internet. But the fact is that the web and social networking are here to stay, and society has to figure out ways to deal with it. Well, that's it for today. But for more information on how this generation is affected by the internet, take a look now at the documentary Growing Up Online.
My fear isn't that I have bad kids. My fear is that my good kids will make a bad decision, one bad judgment, and pay for it permanently. If it's on the net, it's open to anyone. There are no safeguards. Someone can always find everything.
Not wrong, exactly.
Evan Skinner is the stay-at-home mother of 4 teenagers in Chatham, New Jersey,
Welcome, and thank you so much for coming.
and president of Chatham High School's parent-teacher organization.
There is no lack of parent involvement in this community.
It can't be done without parent support. We've had tremendous.
It is what is socially expected here. There is a culture of involvement. There's a culture of participation. And so people do. Thank you so much for coming.
Chatham, New Jersey is less than an hour from Manhattan by train, but has the look and feel of a small town. Parents here have worked hard to create a haven for their children.
Good, how are you? Our kids are very much the children of a small town in a protected environment. Kids walk to school, there are crossing guards. It's incredibly friendly. It's, you know, it's safe.
But the internet, and social networking in particular, has punctured that sense of safety.
The scariest worst part for me is stalkers. It is somebody becoming obsessed with one of my children.
I thought it was asparagus.
Tastes like ginger and soy.
And garlic.
I have 2 very attractive daughters. You know, some guy that all of a sudden decides that really my daughter was meant for him. That kind of stuff scares me.
Oh, calm down. Nice.
Kids think I'm in my home. How could anything bad happen to me? They don't realize that when they're sharing on that keyboard, it's like, let them on in, baby, because they're right here.
Parents need to understand there are predators on the internet who are more vicious than those who used to lurk in parks or playgrounds.
Well, internet predators.
Media coverage of online predators has been building in the last year.
Not being done to stop them before they strike.
It's an all-new investigation.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Tonight on To Catch a Predator.
Congress has held hearings to address the question of predators' access to sites like MySpace and Facebook.
The boogeyman is real, and he lives on the net. He lived in my computer, and he lives in yours. He's at home with your children.
My mom calls it being an informed parent. She like watches Dr. Phil. She reads about all of like the crime that happens, like the date rape or anything, something like that that occurs from the internet, like meeting people on the internet. So she's always been very cautious like that, but it's becoming sort of overbearing. She just has a really tough time getting past that.
Did you find your class schedule, honey?
No, I was going to check that.
Is that what you're doing now?
I'm talking to Jeff.
Oh.
As a way to keep tabs on her kids' internet activity, Evan has stationed the one family computer in the kitchen, where she can keep an eye on it.
I don't know.
But she says she still gets shut out.
If the kids are on Facebook and I'm making dinner or something, they're edgy. I mean, there are times when I will close the refrigerator door and move in this direction, boom, screen goes black.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Agent Bill Segaris, Computer Crime Unit. First of all, parents need to take control of that computer. You need to have passwords. Take control of it.
Evan would like to get the passwords to her kids' Facebook accounts.
I have an idea of how I can do that with my kids, where I will have them give me their passwords, but seal that envelope in some very safe way so that they know that I have not opened that password lightly, but that if they should get into any trouble, if they should disappear, if they should be abducted, that I would be able to break that seal and then get into that information.
They asked me for the password and I said, no, sorry, you're not getting it. It's my Facebook. It's my business.
I'm ignoring them, okay? Don't worry.
I believe that my mom feels so strongly about how we appear on the internet that she would somehow try to get the passwords, that she would try to open the envelope or anything, because she does feel so strongly.
Cam's sister, Tori, is just as reluctant to share her online life with her parents.
Ashley, I'd rather not use our computer and just use it when I'm at my friend's house than have my mom go into my, like, personal things in my private life and, like, take charge of it. It's my own stuff.
My parents, like, they don't understand that I've spent since like 2nd grade online, and that I know what to avoid, and I know pretty much like what can happen. And I think sometimes they forget that because they didn't grow up online.
Some of the random screen name IMs you, it says like, hey, where do you live? I want to meet you. It's pretty obvious, like, this person might be a predator.
Hit that block button.
If someone asks me, like, where do you live, I'll delete them as a friend. Like, why do they want to know where I live at? Like, I don't tell people where I live at.
There has only been one major study of the threat of sexual predators online. Funded by the Department of Justice, the study confirmed what many kids have been saying all along, that most of them know to ignore unwanted solicitations they receive on the internet.
You know, most kids, they're not looking for trouble. The vast majority are just socializing with their friends at school. And when these weird guys send them a message, they just delete them.
The study reported that 1 in 7 kids said they had been sexually solicited online. But researchers found most of those solicitations were mild.
Most of the sexual encounters, most of the sexual solicitations, they're not that big a deal when you actually look at them. Most of it is the 19-year-old saying to the 17-year-old, hey baby. Is that really the image that we come to when we think about sexual solicitations? No. And we have found kids who have engaged in risky behavior online. The fact is, they've engaged in a lot more risky behavior offline.
Sexual predators are a risk, but all the cases, known cases of sexual exploitation involving social networks, have involved kids who have gone out looking for a meeting with somebody. They were not deceived. We need to start thinking about our kids less as victims and more as participants.
Alright, I'm texting Mike now.
Real problems, real damage can result because of things that teenagers do to themselves and each other. And that's what we need to be thinking about.
I'm 16. I just turned 16 yesterday. I'm a swimmer. I've been swimming for 7 years. I play golf. I'm really fun and outgoing. And I work hard in school. And a lot of the people in my school are like, wow, she's smart. I know what it means, like nobody else does. It's weird because I have like this one life that's fake. That's like the happy-go-lucky whatever, and then I have the real me. When I'm online, I'm the real person. I'm completely 100% me. Like, I'll talk about anything to these people because I know they won't judge me. Sometimes it makes me feel better because it's like, oh, there's people out here like me. Like, I can have a little, like, niche of my own, a little comfort zone. But sometimes it makes me feel worse because I know how many people are suffering like me.
Sarah has an eating disorder.
I'll go on websites, I'll go on forums, I'll look for something called Thinspiration, which is basically inspiration to stay and become thinner than I am now. It's just like, here's other people who can do it. Look, this woman, she did it, I can do it too. She has a personal trainer, but she's probably anorexic or has an eating disorder.
What the internet has done is provided these forums for anorexics who want to be anorexic to meet one another. They almost deify anorexia. They call anorexia Anna and then elevate Anna to the goddess Anna. They say they're praying to the goddess Anna or they're asking Anna for help. These are women who take pride in their ability to deny themselves food and to keep their weight at this sort of artificially low and dangerous level.
I can find ways and tips and tricks to like binge or to purge or to starve, stuff like that that just makes living with an eating disorder a little bit easier. Like what foods to binge on that are like healthy and things to do like after you purge so that your throat doesn't burn as much and things like that. I'll be talking online to these people and I'll be like the anorexic person that I am and I'll just go on and I'll see like, oh, like, wow, like this person hardly ate today, like mad props to them, congratulations, I wish I was like that. But then sometimes certain days this like other side of me will kick in and be go, this is disgusting, these people shouldn't be living like this, what's wrong with them? It's like part of me is completely Anna and part of me is anti-Anna. So it's like a complete struggle every day.
What do your parents know?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. All they know is I like to eat healthy and I like to exercise. They know nothing.
It really helps for me to talk out my feelings to someone and know that people are listening.
Why tell their parents when they have the whole world to talk to?
You know, it's better than talking to the people in my life.
So if I put it out here, at least I'm getting it out, you know. And you guys can make what you want.
The internet is always a willing listener. It's very seductive.
And I thought I'd put my 2 cents in.
You can do it in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. You can do it when you're tired without any makeup.
I'm really bored.
And you forget who can see the things you're writing. You forget the impact it may have in your life and on others. To you, it's you and the internet and the people you want to read it, not necessarily everyone who does.
It's like second nature for me. I go on YouTube and I
When you combine those things with the immediacy and the power of the technology to allow them to act on impulse, that's when everybody gets into trouble.
Last January, a group of friends from Chatham High School headed into Manhattan to attend a rock concert. Evan Skinner's son, Cam, was among them.
However many can fit in Madison Square Garden, there was about that many underage high schoolers going into the city on trains. I was on the train. I was partaking in the fun on the train as well as all my friends were. And there was a ton of pictures taken.
The next day, the kids posted the pictures and videos online. It didn't take long for Evan to hear about it.
It was horrifying. Open, public drinking, vomiting, on the trains going in, on the trains going out. I'm talking about hundreds of kids, 3 emergency rooms around Madison Square Garden who had to close because they had so many kids. Madison Square Garden ran out of wheelchairs to take drunken and unconscious children out of that place.
Stop being a bitch, get up!
Well, I found out through one of the parents, and because I was the PTO president, I elected to share that information.
I got a video! Put that on YouTube, I will!
My mom decided that it was her duty, her civic duty, to send out an email to all the parents in the high school describing the events of the concert and the events on the train. So when parents are reading this, they read, your son and daughter, if they went to the concert, they were drinking, and there are graphic pictures of your sons and daughters on the internet, signed Evan Skinner.
Well, my God, you cannot believe the response. I got emails from people I didn't know existed. About half of them were like, thank you, thank you, thank you. As a result of that email, I sat down with my child. I had no idea. He took me on Facebook and showed me pictures from the concert. It was absolutely appalling, blah, 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 blah. And about half were the full gamut of, who the hell do you think you are? You stay out of our lives. Thank you so much. 2, are you naive? And the kids were furious.
I flipped out when that happened. Personally, I felt I had a right to, just because it was, in my opinion, so out of line.
No, that's what Aaron told me. Wait, you were there, right?
Just because of this email, a couple of my friends got in trouble, a lot of people in my school got in trouble. It just really made me mad. I'm just sort of starting to realize how difficult it's been. So my mom and I have had sort of a tough year as far as getting along.
He has pretty much cut off his family being involved in his life other than we have dinner. And he doesn't share, he doesn't talk about what he does.
All right, hold on, wait. I don't know why they're usually...
He actually said that we had ruined his high school years.
Oh, dude, nice kill.
I mean, I'm choking up just thinking about it. I have spent almost 2 decades raising children, saying to myself, don't take it personally, don't take it personally, don't take it personally. I remember being 11, I remember being 13, I remember being 16, and I remember having secrets. But it's really hard when it's the other side.
It's been said that the internet has created the greatest generation gap since the advent of rock and roll.
I wonder where they'll go next. I wonder what hangout they'll find where we aren't watching, because they'll find it. And there are so many devices they can use to connect. There are so many hotspots and friends' houses and libraries and cafes, all these places where they can go online where we can't control them.
I clearly made a mistake putting that computer in his room. I allowed the computer to become too much of his life. My son had these online relationships going on that were completely invisible to me.
When Ryan Halligan was in 7th grade, he told his father he was being bullied and asked him to teach him how to fight.
Right after Christmas, we got into a routine. We would go down into the basement after dinner and we put on the red boxing gloves. And we had this conversation one night and said, now Ryan, you know how to fight. The last thing I want to see happen now is that you now start picking fights at school. Don't ever want to learn that you're now the bully. But I did say to him, I said, Ryan, if that kid or any of his friends ever lay a single finger on you, you've got my full permission to wail on them.
After that, things got better. Ryan told his parents the bullying had stopped. But then, in October of 2003, he killed himself.
All I kept asking myself was why? Why? I kept crying. Why, Ryan? Why did you do this?
Anybody who would look at him as a child and then have a crystal ball and see into the future as to how he would die, you just wouldn't believe it.
Just days after Ryan's suicide, John turned on his son's computer, looking for answers.
I started to say, okay, there has to be something here. At the time, I was concerned about what everybody was concerned about, predators and pedophiles, right? I mean, that was what the media was talking about. You heard the horror stories. I thought, oh, let me go log on to his AOL account. Let me see if Ryan's friends will open up to me online.
I saw Ryan's screen name pop up, and I was really angry, actually. I thought just playing a big joke, and to me that was not funny at all.
All these instant messages started popping up. You know, who are you? What are you doing? This isn't funny. Get off of Ryan's account. And I was typing back as fast as I could. I'm Mr. Halligan. Is there anything anybody's willing to share with me that might explain why Ryan did what he did?
We just started talking about what I knew. People would say things to Ryan over the internet and at school. Like, you were such a loser, and just really mean things.
Over the summer, Ryan had become the victim of a vicious cyberbullying campaign. One boy had started a rumor that Ryan was gay.
I didn't stick up for him at the time because I thought, you know, it was just that middle school bullying. It happens. But it was real, and it really hurt him.
You know, back in my day, if you're getting bullied, it ends at the schoolyard. You come home, then you have your safe haven. But not for Ryan. He came home and did what every other kid did. He went online, and then now the taunts got to continue at home as well.
According to Ryan's friends, the tipping point came when a popular girl at school flirted with Ryan over instant messaging, only to humiliate him later by telling him it had all been a big joke. It was a game she often played with boys online.
I guess the fun is like dropping the bomb, you know, oh, just kidding. And then that like crushed him. I mean, you wouldn't do that to someone's face, but online it's completely different. You can do whatever you want, and no one can do anything. You're at your house, they're at their house. It's different.
There's something about reading words. You read it over and over again, and you start to believe it. The words make it real. One kid told me, you never know if it's your best friend or your worst enemy that's doing this, because so much of it comes to you anonymously, so you never know who to trust.
As the days turned into weeks, John probed deeper into his son's online life. He discovered a folder on Ryan's computer containing a series of conversations between Ryan and a boy with a screen name he didn't recognize.
The two of them were spending a lot of time exchanging information that they were finding online that had to do with suicide and death. They found one website that taught you how to hang yourself. So it gave you how to tie the noose.
There was a website that Ryan and this boy visited and they commiserated on, that you plug in your personality traits and what you like and dislike, and then they spit out the best way you can commit suicide.
The most chilling conversation was actually a very short one. Ryan started off saying, "Tonight's the night I think I'm going to do it." And the kid fired back, "It's about blank in time."
Two weeks later, in the early morning of October 7th, 2003, Ryan's sister found him hanging from a noose in his bathroom. In the weeks that followed, John felt compelled to track down the boy he thought might have been Ryan's co-conspirator.
I approached him online with Ryan's ID, and I said, I'm Ryan's dad. I asked him, were you friends with Ryan? And he said yes. And I said, did you guys ever talk about death and suicide? And he said no. I just flat out asked him, so what is your name? And he gave me his real name. And while I still had him online, I called the house, and I got the father on the phone, and I introduced myself to him, and I said, I'm afraid that your son is perhaps thinking of doing what my son had done. The response was kind of weird. It was, he first said, well, I know nothing about computers. I don't have an email account, so you can't email this to me. And I said, well, I'd like to get it to you somehow. And he said, well, I'll have my wife call you when she comes home from work. That evening went by, I never got a call. Another day went by, no call.
4 years have gone by now, and John says he never got a satisfying response from the boy or his family. Occasionally, he still visits the boy's website, which is full of references to death and suicide.
I had so much unresolved pain, and I instinctively wanted somebody to pay for this. I wanted to blame somebody so desperately. Blame. I feel the computer, I can't blame the computer. The computer and the internet were not the cause of my son's suicide, but they helped, I believe they helped amplify and accelerate the hurt and the pain that he was trying to deal with that started in person in the real world.
Across the country, cases of cyberbullying have been springing up more and more. A few have ended in suicide, most haven't. But it's clear that the internet has become a new weapon in the arsenal of adolescents, one that's not going away.
Let's get going. If somebody's been cyberbullied, what advice do we give them? We teach our kids to be kind to other people. Please, thank you, opening doors, giving up their seat for somebody who's older. So in the same way, we need to teach them good cyber citizenship.
You stop what you're doing, do not enter back, block the person, and tell an adult.
We need to teach them good manners online. Stop, block, and tell. We need to teach them how to use the technology responsibly.
Okay, and what should we tell them?
And if we can do that, we can keep the kids safe.
Receiving some mean messages, and you want them to stop.
You have a generation who's faced with a society with fundamentally different properties, thanks to the internet. We can turn our backs and say this is bad, we don't want a world like this. But it's not going away. So instead of saying this is terrible, instead of saying stop MySpace, stop Facebook, stop the internet, it's a question for us of how we teach ourselves and our children to live in a society where these properties are fundamentally a way of life. This is public life today.
Jess, I'll tell you, you're too much.
Soon after Jessica Hunter's parents made her take down her website, she rebuilt it. She is back online as Autumn Meadows.
I gotta be honest,
Jessica's father is surprised to find himself supporting her.
I think you're actually going to turn out okay. It took a long time for me to finally say, well, this may not be such a bad thing. She found a world that she could live in. And, yeah, you find on the internet what you want, If it's bad, if they're looking to hurt, that's what they're going to look for, and they're going to find it. But if they're looking for a way to create or to reach out, that's what they're going to find on the internet.
Maybe they don't always agree with it, but
they do support me, most definitely. And I think that, to a degree, they're proud of me.
You know I love you.
You know, people say things about the internet and that they talk about the danger. From where I stand, I'm glad it's there.
After her interview with Frontline, Sarah told her parents about her eating disorder. She started seeing a therapist.
I want to get better, but you can't just go cold turkey on it. So I hope that it's not my life for the rest of my life, because I know I should not be living like this, and I can't live like this. But like, I always look to the next day, but the next day is always as good as I hoped.
Last June, the class of 2007 graduated from Chatham High School.
Graduates, we are all here to celebrate your accomplishments. And if you were...
Evan Skinner was there to watch her son Cam graduate.
Cam and I have gone through some rough times. I think adolescence is just the most difficult time for kids to be kids and parents to be parents. I would say that the loss of open sharing and communication is the single most painful part of being a parent for me.
Greg Bucata graduated too. He had made a big decision.
It'll be hard, but I need to disconnect. I need to just pull the plug on this internet life for a little bit and see what it's like. Right now, face it, all I do is sit online when I'm sitting home.
Gregory William Bucata.
At the Coast Guard Academy, where Greg will be attending in the fall, he will be prohibited from using cell phones or the internet for the first 2 months. His parents aren't sure he's going to make it.
I think it's going to be a huge withdrawal for him.
I think he's going to have trouble.
Yeah,
I really do, because he's never been without it.
Cameron McCutcheon Skinner.
Cam Skinner will also be going on to college. He says he's joined a new Facebook group for his college class of 2011. And he won't be giving his mother the password.
Class of 2007, congratulations.
This report continues on our website, where you can watch the full program again online. Read extended interviews with teachers,
what is cheating and what's not cheating.
parents,
Screen goes black.
I was concerned. What's going on?
and a researcher who's studying teenagers and the internet.
The internet's allowed them to display that identity.
Get updates on the kids featured in the program.
No, I should not be living like this, and I can't live like this.
I would try and try and try, and it just wasn't me.
Some background from the producers on reporting this story, and then join the discussion at pbs.org.